start us off on like a down note here, but I'm asking because I'm legitimately interested. Lucas, I wanted to ask about Yukihiro Takahashi. I know that's a guy who you're talking about on social media recently, and I'm not as familiar with him. Some of our listeners may be, but he passed away recently, and it seemed to affect you quite a bit, and I wanted to ask a little bit about who he is and what he means to you, if that's okay.
I really am happy that you brought this up, Will. I feel like we haven't had an in memoriam on ECL since the SpongeBob guy, which I wish I remembered his name because it feels disrespectful, passed away.
Hillenberg.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yukihiro Takahashi, he was the drummer for the Japanese band YMO, which stands for Yellow Magic Orchestra. Mm-hmm. And for those of our listeners maybe not as familiar with Japanese music, the way this is kind of an awkward comparison because it's not one-to-one. YMO is YMO and the Beatles are the Beatles, but I like to describe them as the Japanese Beatles, basically. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This band that popped up in the late 70s that you don't even have to be a fan of Japanese music, a fan of electronic music in general, are basically groundbreaking electronic music band. One of the very first, predates New Order, of that era of Kraftwerk, essentially creating the genre of electronic music. And all of the members of YMO, much like the Beatles, went on to have very successful solo careers. Ryuichi Sakamoto has done multiple movie soundtracks that you might be familiar with. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, The Revenant, and what is the other gentleman's name? Oh, Hiromu Hosono. Hiromi Hosono. He has inspired tons of music. I know that Mac DeMarco did an album covering his songs. Harry Styles said his album Harry's House was inspired by Hosono's house. But the most kind of underrated member of YMO is Yukihiro Takahashi. He was the drummer, so kind of and in many ways similar to Ringo in that he was the cute one, the drummer, and the goofy one of the group. And if you haven't heard the music of YMO before, do yourself a favor and go look up some YMO live videos on YouTube because they're absolutely incredible. Just an incredible band unlike anything else, not only in world music but just in music in general. And he was a huge part of that with his drumming and his charisma and swagger. But he also went on to have solo music as well, which I encourage anyone to look up. The animation connection here is that he did the soundtrack to an anime I'm very fond of, Nadia, Secret of the Blue Water. But yeah, he did some cover, a song I discovered recently after he passed away. I've been listening to a ton of his music in memoriam. And a song he covered, Helpless, by Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And it's an incredibly emotional cover of the song, especially given that the guy just passed away. So yes, I'm glad that you gave me the platform to talk about one of my other interests outside of art, or Japanese music. But yeah, I highly recommend the works of not just YMO, but the solo works of Yukihiro Takahashi. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, you're welcome. And like I said, if seeing it from the outside, it seemed like something that was close to your heart, and that's kind of that's a part of the matter of this episode of Elwood City Limits, the episodic Arthur podcast, where we're going to be rounding out season 15 of Arthur with the final episode of the season. And also we're going to be saying goodbye to the end of an era, which we'll talk about a bit later. Will Young here, that's Lucas Mancini. And of course, unfortunately, this week that we're recording this, I think this is something both you and I probably have feelings about, and I promise we'll get to Arthur in just a second. But while we're kind of memorializing people, Lucas and I both are wrestling fans of professional wrestling. Mm-hmm. And this week, somebody who is one of the, I'd say, a real unsung talent in terms of the grand scheme of the modern wrestling scene, but like in retrospect, maybe one of maybe out of there, one of the best American independent wrestlers of the past 20 years, and his name is Jay Briscoe, Jameen Pugh, and he passed away very suddenly this week. Really sad situation, but I want to offer up the fact that we both want to wish condolences to everybody who's affected by this, and best wishes as well. He was involved in a car crash, and members of his family are in different stages of either critical or just in hospitalized. So we really are hoping the best for that situation. It was a real, it really felt like a slap to the face just reading about that, because he's only 38 years old, barely older than me or Lucas, and just something that really takes you by surprise as a fan of anything. And sometimes stuff is just not fair, and this really felt like it. So just wanted to put that out there as well, that Jay Briscoe, rest in peace. One of the best, one of the best talents in the company that he started in, Ring of Honor. One of the best tag team wrestlers of all time, and in his own right has a claim as a really tremendous professional wrestler, and as many people have said, a devoted family man from all accounts as well, and friend.
Yeah, tough week.
Yeah, exactly. I know that the Takahashi thing was last week. Was it, or the week before?
I think it was either at the start of this week or over the weekend. Yeah, it just happened.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Tough week in many respects. But like I said, it's actually in a broad way. It's going to tie into a theme that we're going to be touching on in this episode of the podcast. I want to say right away, I get a little notification every time we get a new review on Apple Podcasts. So thank you to listener John Gregorio for the positive review. Also want to give a shout out to one of our patrons, AB Koblenz, in the Discord. I don't know if you saw this, Lucas. He made our Muffy Photoshop come to life.
Oh, I didn't see this. Look, I'll look for it right now. Was it in the ECL stuff channel?
I think it's in the Arthur channel. I'm gonna check and make sure as well.
Oh no, it's in the ECL show discussion.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, Butler did what? This is great. I'm gonna give this a laugh react, and if you want to be a part of this fun, Will, how can folks get into this Discord that we're talking about right now?
Well, of course, that is one of the perks we offer as being a patron over at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. We've increased kind of perks this year, or at least changed them up a bit. As we've been mentioning before, you get every episode of Elwood City Limits a week early, and you also get our side series, which includes For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast, and our new side series, which is called ECL Origins. We're going to have a new episode of that coming up next week for patrons. We're finally talking about Yvonne of the Yukon, something that we've been wanting to have a reason to talk about for a very, very long time. We're very excited to do that. While we're here, might as well just say thank you to everybody who subscribes to us over there. And we want to thank especially patrons like Light Relentless. We want to say thank you to Jake Bailey, and we want to say thank you to Kristen. We want to say thank you. There's a lot of X's, just making sure everybody gets mentioned. Want to say thank you to Revd. Thank you to Hannah Kitten. Thank you very much to Kirsten and Emmy the Ghost. Thank you to Anthony Williams, Lauren Rodriguez, and DJ Richopo. Thank you to Josh Andallo and Matt M. Want to say thank you to Cecil Robinson and Melissa H. And also want to say thank you finally to Nehemiah Unimuk. So thank you, everybody, and to Alex Koblenz as well for your patronage and for that cool Photoshop. Thank you, everybody. Patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And also, we have one piece of email this week that is actually from a patron of ours. That would be Kat Ledbetter, who has wonderful taste in movies and also just had an album come out. If you search up Dog Fan Club on Bandcamp, her album is great. I bought it myself and listened to it, and worth a whole listen the whole way through. Kat is very, very talented. We've been sitting on this email from June 2022, because way back then, Kat sent us an email about her relation to the episode we're going to talk about, Grandpa Dave's Memory album. And it was a really nice email, and I asked Kat if she wanted to expand on her thoughts a little, because I thought it might kind of help us with what this episode is about. And she did. So she sent me a bit of a longer email, which I will read, but thank you for the initial email in June, Kat. So here's what Kat says. I want to start by praising Arthur for handling the subject of dementia with care and kindness. I wasn't introduced to this episode until 6 or so months ago, and I'm beyond thankful I found it. In school, we learned about dementia and Alzheimer's, but never really discussed the diseases in depth at any level of education. If I had seen this as a child, I would have been less scared when it became a part of my family. Every case is different. The timeline for each stage and the way symptoms present are different. That being said, I believe they showed the start of dementia perfectly. The short-term memory loss and forgetting newer memories first is accurate to the disease. Media and the world almost always brushes dementia off as simply forgetting memories and little things. I've seen people online even call it cute because, they're so forgetful it's precious, when in reality it's not. Dementia is one of, if not the worst disease that could happen to someone. I applaud Arthur for not falling into this common trope, but instead portraying reality as in-depth as they could for a short time span episode directed towards a very young audience. I think showing this episode to kids, or any age really, is extremely important. My mama, like Grandpa Dave, suffered from dementia for several years until her passing in August of 2021. Arthur's reaction to Grandpa Dave forgetting his name was exactly like mine. I remember the first time Mama forgot mine. During the early stages, my family would go over to her house to drop off her meals for the day. As I was leaving from giving her the supper container, she looked at me and asked, "Who are you again?" I felt the exact pain and heartbreak Arthur felt. I held it together until I got into my car. I cried. Arthur's reaction, like mine, was realistic and normal. Not fully understanding why she'd forgotten me was rough. It took time to accept. Another connection I have with this episode is the memory book. When my mom was first diagnosed, we printed a bunch of photos for her to sort. She loved her photos. After a while, we found her writing names on the back of who the photo was of. We took it upon ourselves to put name tags at the bottom of each photo. Something I like to do sometimes is continue storylines of shows and movies in my head. This episode is one of those. I can't say if they carry Grandpa Dave's dementia into the rest of the show, but if they did, I feel like it would be exactly how it went for me. Seeing Mom Reed taking up the primary caregiver role in this episode is mirrored in my life, just how my mother cared for my mama. She took her to the doctor, helped her with medicine, and eventually moved in with her full-time for about 2 years. I feel Mom Reed would do the same thing, or have Grandpa Dave move in with them while fully caring for him. I view myself as Arthur. One of the last things people lose is music. I would often sing to or with my mama as a way to connect with her and or bring her joy. Arthur would definitely play piano for Grandpa Dave, and maybe DW would sing. One of the most important things this episode came from Francine's booby. During the scene where she's sitting with Arthur and Francine, she states that no matter what happens, Grandpa Dave is always going to be Arthur's grandpa. My mother and I would often discuss the same thing, that no matter what my mama always knew, we were hers, and she always loved us. The connection was always present. Love is the one thing they will never forget. So I think we're going to talk about this through as we discuss the episode itself, but I wanted to put Kat's feelings there, and I imagine that some of our listeners probably have a reaction to this episode as well. So again, we always invite your input. ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com is how you can email us. You can also send us messages on the social media. And as always, you can keep it private. Just let me know, or we can read it on the air. Whatever, the choice is up to you. This is a personal subject, and I've been waiting for us to talk about this episode for a long time. In fact, I actually watched this one early. I watched it last week because I was so anticipating it so much.
Especially since you told me it was the end of Grandpa Dave. I didn't know what the implications would be. I didn't know if there was going to be a narrative writing Grandpa Dave out of the show with this episode. So, a big episode.
Yeah, so I said that, I probably said that on the last episode. And of course, this is always subject to correction, usually from someone such as Peebs. And, I welcome that. But I'm fairly certain that this is the last appearance of Grandpa Dave as a character, this episode, which the one we were talking about Grandpa Dave's memory album. So this is kind of it. And it's not a completely happy place to leave the character, but it's also not as negative as I thought it was going to be. But yeah, this is the last time we'll probably hear Grandpa Dave's voice actor. I think anything else beyond this is he appears in a photo or appears in the background, but is not really like a character anymore.
Wow.
it's a bit different than the memorials that we were doing, when very real people passed away. But for me, it's too bad, just because I feel like, as we've said many times, Grandpa Dave is at the center of at least one of both of our favorite episodes of the series, and he's not in the show all that much, but he's very memorable. He's always been very memorable.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, he's always been kind of playing second fiddle to Grandma Thora, but we've talked ad nauseum. It's almost to the degree that it's a meme within the ECL community. The gold standard for serious Arthur storytelling is Grandpa Dave's Country Farm. So I'm sure you're all at home wondering, does Grandpa Dave's memory album live up to that gold standard?
Well, of course, and we will get into that. I got a pleasant surprise in starting this episode, because who's doing this cold open? It's Bubby! Francine's Bubby, voiced by Joan Rivers. She's back, and she's all over this episode. I was so happy.
Yeah, and this is a great cold open, too. They make really good use of... Francine's Bubby talks like no other character on Arthur.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. She's Joan Rivers. But often the celebrities... I feel like whenever a celebrity is guesting on Arthur, it could go one of two ways. It could do the Matt Damon way, where they are essentially a blank slate. And then sometimes they do really fun characterizations, and this is an example of really making the best of your celebrity guest star. Great opening, as she's just kind of monologuing about what it's like to be old, the good and the bad.
Yeah, it's different than the architect Frank Gehry being like, "That's right, George. Now I'll show you how to build." And no disrespect to the man. It's just
of course.
He's not a persona the way Joan Rivers is. So, so much of my notes is just lines from her. So just it makes me feel like singing, but don't worry, I'll spare you. And just, going around talking about that. Actually, there are some drawbacks, but there are also some great things about getting old, kind of priming the pump for what this episode's story is about. She's like, your knees don't work as well, so when you drop something, you have to pick it up the first time, or you have to leave it there. Big deal. The dog will eat it. And she's I was gonna say inimitable, but you can easily imitate her. But there's nobody who is quite like Joan Rivers. So the good things about getting old is that any time could be nap time, and you never stop making friends. And she's told off screen. It's kind of like a video reviewer cliche of somebody who we can't hear saying that the cold open is over, to which she kind of protests this, and she's like, "It's public television. Why don't we all just stop and smell the roses?" It was great. It was such a fun, bright way to start off the episode. And I had also been hoping, I kept thinking every time we see Bubby is probably the last time, because I don't know how often she recurs. So this was a wonderful surprise. I had no idea she was part of this episode. So the actual episode has to do with Grandpa Dave, of course. He's visiting the Reeds while he's in town to see the doctor, because as we know, he lives on his own farm until now, and so he's coming into the city and visiting everybody. It's they start off rather slow in terms of what exactly the episode is about. There's a bit of comedy at the start where Arthur is putting up the cot for Grandpa, and DW is very excited for him to get there. We get the rare kind of landmark in time of where we are, because when they pick up Grandpa Dave, DW refers to Aunt Lucy's wedding from the first season,
right?
And she says that just happened this summer. So we're past the summer into the new school year. There's no snow on the ground. My guess would be maybe September, or maybe the next year, but March or April or something. I don't know. The Arthur timeline, it's not something that I'm willing to map out, at least not at this point in my life.
It doesn't actually make any sense, because he's always in third grade, except we've experienced 6 different Christmases, 8 different autumns, 5 different Halloweens, yet he's perpetually in third grade.
It's either that, or it's it's the most... Arthur lives the most jam-packed, wild life that anybody could ever hope to live as an 8-year-old.
Except we've had 2 New Years.
Right. They go to pick him up. Grandpa seems a little bit more forgetful than usual, but I think the last episode that was really heavily involving him was the one with the treasure map, where it was more like Grandpa Dave is getting old, so he's not as active as he used to be.
Yeah. I mean, even in Grandpa Dave's old country farm, he's already too old to properly take care of the farm by himself. There's a room full of chickens.
That's true, but he was still very physical. He was very active and up to the challenge, kind of. He really had trouble organizing himself. Was the real problem there. He also mentions a couple times in this episode he makes a special country stew that is apparently his specialty. What do you think's in a Grandpa Dave special country stew?
Oh, whatever it is, I bet it is bussing. I bet it's awesome.
So, probably I'm trying to think. If we're talking meat, probably my guess would be a beef of some kind.
Yes, hearty. That
hearty.
country stew's hearty. Yeah.
So if it's a stew, then probably some potatoes in there. If you really want
celery.
Hearty. Yeah. Okay. Carrots, probably.
Yes, please. All the root vegetables. Oh, I want some stew, Will. You're getting me hungry.
Yeah, and we're going to be having snow tomorrow, so it's going to be a great day for stew if you can get it. And then probably I don't know. I don't really make stew, so I'm just trying to think of something else to make it really nice and thick.
I just had pulled up a stew recipe. We need to take that class that's in the next episode we're talking about.
Yeah, actually, that's not a bad idea.
Ooh, how about some 3 tablespoons of tomato paste to really get that stuff thick?
Yeah, okay, yes.
Oh, and add 2 tablespoons of cornstarch to even add further to the thickness.
Perfect. I think that's Grandpa Dave's country stew right there. Sounds good to me. So Arthur and DW looking forward to playing with Grandpa Dave, and he's up for it. He's very much still an active grandpa. He's playing with them. He's listening to DW sing, not so great. And then they play hide and seek with him, but he ends up forgetting that he was playing. They see him later as DW is hiding in the treehouse and he'll never find me here. And then he never looks for them. So they have to have a talk before Grandpa Dave goes to the doctor, because he says that his memory is starting to go, which DW has a hard time understanding at first. He explains that he has a disease. So they never say dementia, they never say Alzheimer's or anything of the like. They do explicitly say that he has a disease that affects his memory. And Arthur especially takes it quite personally. He takes it quite hard in a way that's hard for him to understand at first, because Grandpa Dave forgets his name. When they come in, they say why didn't you come looking for us? We were playing hide and seek. And he's like, oh, I sorry, I forgot. Sorry about that. Archie? No, wait a minute. Arnold? Forgets his name, which is, a little bit shocking, I guess I'll say, if you're on the other end of that. I personally can't say. I have had family members that have had a form of dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever you want to call it, but I was very little, and I was not on interacting terms with them. My dad's mother, my grandmother had Alzheimer's, but she I was too young. We didn't really talk that much. There's a family member of mine right now who I believe might be in the early stages. So this is, this is pretty accurate, and thankfully we have Kat's view on it as well. So it seems to be, I can't imagine that there wasn't some kind of experience on the Arthur creative team, because this is unfortunately can be, I don't know about common, but it's not uncommon when you have a family member who gets to this age. And they don't tiptoe around the diagnosis. I appreciate that they use a very light touch here. And of course, it's Arthur. I'm not expecting this to be a great, huge affair, but it's he lays it exactly what it is. They don't say the terms, and they don't really talk about the future. They don't talk about what's going to happen, because unfortunately, as we live here in 2023, there is no cure for this. And certainly not back when this episode was made. It's very much this will continue to happen until Grandpa Dave dies. But we don't think about that. And really, you don't have to. Like, it's for another time. And that other time, I'm going to go on a limb and say they don't talk about it on Arthur. But it's to do with to start with. And it's probably common to what a lot of kids, how they first encounter this sort of disease. So I appreciated, as Kat has said, the way that they handled it was very appropriate to the audience watching it. It's to the point where I mentioned this somewhere, and I don't remember where. They actually made like a guide to this, an online guide on the official Arthur website for how to talk to a child about dementia or Alzheimer's.
I had no idea.
And they use this episode as the basis, and it's very much like, here is how to tell them what is happening, without getting too serious about it, like to break it down in terms of like a very young child. So, and which I think is great. I think that's so good that we made this resource out of this.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have much to add. It's funny, and this is not indicative of the quality of this episode, but this episode is kind of laser focused on this subject, kind of once it kicks into gear. And as a result, I don't have that many notes. It really, once we get Grandpa Dave's diagnosis, it kind of just unfurls from there. And it's all kind of from Arthur's perspective, just kind of wrestling with the situation. So I don't have a lot to add.
Yeah, no problem. And that's I agree with you. Like, there's not as many notes as for a more plot dense episode of Arthur. They do explicitly say that Grandpa Dave is going to be moving closer to the Reed family from now on. So that sucks because if we know this is the last time we're going to really be seeing Grandpa Dave as a character, it's like, but he's right there. Like, now he's in town. Like, I think the reason we see Grandma Thor so much is because she lives in Elwood City. And now it's like we removed the thing that has kept Grandpa Dave away, which is the farm. But now we're not going to talk to him anymore. And it's just too bad that we kind of lose out on a good character. So anyway, so Arthur is dealing with this. DW is young enough that she's quite... she's taking it in stride, and she decides that she's going to make a memory book for Grandpa Dave to help him remember, which is funny because the episode is called his memory album, but they only say memory book. They don't call it an album in the episode. So she's going to make a memory book. She's going to put a bunch of photos together so that Grandpa Dave can remember everybody. But Arthur is very resistant to this. He's very frustrated and angry. There's a great transition where DW says, "I'm only going to put one photo of you in the book," and it's a photo of Arthur with his eyes crossed and frowning and looking off camera, and then they go from that picture to Arthur holding the exact same pose in the park where he is stormed away to. And so, I love stuff like that. I love transitions like that. And it's in the park where we run across Francine and Francine's Booby again. And we get, it's like every time Booby's on screen, we got like a little mini Joan Rivers routine going on. They accidentally hit him with the frisbee, just like, "Oh, Arthur, are you okay? How many fingers am I holding up?" And they eventually, Arthur does admit to Booby and Francine that he's upset that his Grandpa Dave seems to be forgetting who he is. And so Bubby says, "Can we talk about this over some pastrami? This one's got me running all around like a golden retriever." So they go back to Francine's apartment and have some pastrami. It's a great way to talk about upsetting news.
It certainly helps the medicine go down easier.
Yeah. So Bubby does talk to Arthur a little bit about this, and she does, as Kat's email said, mentions that even though Grandpa Dave may forget things, he's still your grandfather and he loves you very, very much. So to help with the whole thing, Arthur invites Bubby and Francine over for dinner at the Reed house where Grandpa Dave is going to be. And that's where they're going to present him with the memory album. Francine mentions at the apartment that, it's like, does Bubby want to come over? Yeah, sure, if you don't mind her cleaning up. And then later Bubby's like, "I'll do the dishes. If I don't keep moving, I'll fossilize." So she's, like that's just who she is. She's always going. She's always doing something. She's very, very much has to have a direction. She's not good at sitting still. So they show Grandpa Dave the memory album. It has all of these photos of different events. Like there's a picture of like DW at Aunt Lucy's wedding. I mean, we're getting into the end of the episode here, but they also have pictures that they got from Francine and her booby of Elwood City as it used to be in like Grandpa Dave's heyday. And he's looking at these photos and he says, essentially his short-term memory isn't that great, but the things from long ago he can remember no problem. So him and Bubby start to reminisce over these old photos of Elwood City. There's one
that's actually accurate to what I've heard about Alzheimer's and dementia, right? Is that your older memories are the ones that stay, and it becomes harder to make new memories.
Yes, precisely. And of course, if you may have seen that viral video from some years ago of that dementia patient who kind of has a degree of reminiscence over like music, and that's what Kat was talking about in the email. So yeah, as we end off the episode, Grandpa Dave and Bubby are like remembering how Elwood City used to be. In the photo that we see, it's like a photo of Bubby when she was probably in her like 20s or something. I just noticed her head was really weirdly shaped in that photo. I don't know if you caught that.
I didn't notice it, no.
Okay. Yeah, and the one last thing I wanted to note is, the big line that we have here is this Grandpa Dave feels bad that he is forgetting things, and he will continue to forget things, and he apologizes to Arthur and DW, and they both give him a hug with the book, and Arthur says, even if you do forget my name once in a while, I'm still your grandson, which was a really, really nice way to put that, so... Yeah, I think we may have more to say about this in terms of our final thoughts on the episode. So we're going to get into that either in just a moment or right after this.
Supporting this podcast is how it keeps going, and it's very easy to do. So here's how you can do that. If you're listening to this show and want to get the full back catalog of Elwood City Limits and all of its sister shows and offshoots, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and even more services. You can also go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/Elwood City Limits for the full back catalog. If we aren't on a service you use, please let us know. You can interact with us on social media. We're on Twitter @ECL Podcast, Instagram @Elwood City Limits, and twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits Pod for our occasional streams. We're also on Facebook and Tumblr. Feel free to reach out to us on social media, or you can email us, and your email might be read on the show, elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Finally, for exclusive content including entire side series like For the Kids, a PBS Kids podcast, and ECL Origins, subscribe to us for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. That's all for now. Thanks a lot for listening, and now back to the show.
And this is it. The final Arthur story of season 15. The final traditionally animated Arthur feature is Buster's Carpool Catastrophe. And I got one more final for you, Lucas. This is the last Arthur episode to feature friend of the show, Dallas Jokic, as the voice of Arthur.
Wow. It's so weird that this is the last one and not Grandpa Dave's memory album. Like, Grandpa Dave's memory album has the feel of a series finale. Like, it's kind of impactful. It feels like literally closing the memory book on an era of Arthur. Buster's Carpool Catastrophe, well, let's get into it.
You almost could have probably made the Grandpa Dave episode like a double length. Like, and I wouldn't have been upset about that. Have more time to sit with it. But yeah, so this one starts off with Buster, Muffy, and Arthur, who are the main three of this episode. They are at a cooking class that they're taking on the regular under a French chef named Francois Poufot. Did that name ring any bells for you, Lucas?
Francois Poufot? Is this some sort of pop culture reference?
Well, yeah, I thought you might know the name of French director Francois Truffaut.
Truffaut, yes, I am familiar. Yeah. But I didn't notice. I think I didn't notice the name of the guy in this episode. I was just scrambling to write him down as throwaway character of the week. By the way, is he played by Bruce Dinsmore?
I'm not sure. I kind of meant to look up who plays him. That's a good question though. I wouldn't be surprised. It didn't have the same vocal signature that that he has, but maybe he just kind of bent his voice enough. So on the IMDb page, which, as in previous interviews, can be don't completely trust it, but it's credited to an actor named Tony Robinow.
Okay.
Who
he does a fantastic job.
Who also has apparently played Sue Ellen's dad on the show. And has been in a bunch of other, like, Montreal-based voice and acting projects. Tony Robinow. Yes, he's quite the character. He's kind of, they model him a little bit after Gordon Ramsay because he has his own reality show called Preparing with Pufo, and he's known to be like very abrasive and direct. He's not swearing at anybody, but he's very he tells it like it is. Yes. So his lesson is all about asking what the most important food is. Buster guesses potato chips, to which he, and of course he's French, so he has a French accent, just like, potato chips, they have the trans fats. Better you should eat dirt. Muffy says chicken lickin' chick sticks with cheddarola, to which he says, never mention this chicken lickin' to me again. And Arthur guesses a fancy pastry filled with fruit. So the answer, according to the chef, is bread. And the fruit pastry is because Arthur wants to make like a type of dessert in time for his dad's birthday, and that's why he took this cooking class. And he really wants to get to that, but they're starting at the very, very basics in terms of learning how to make bread.
The French chef says you must crawl before you can walk.
Mm-hmm. So this is called Buster's Carpool Catastrophe because the cooking class is kind of secondary to what we're actually talking about, which is that Muffy, who was originally being driven to the cooking class by Bailey, has to carpool in Buster's car with Buster and Arthur after her limo breaks down.
Which, by the way...
Yeah.
Is this cooking class like a state over? We watched the commute to this cooking class, and they're like on rural roads with cows. Where is this cooking class? Like, usually a cooking class is at like a community center.
Yeah.
Or a community college. But yeah, it seems like they're going to this guy's house in another state.
Well, and so if we think about it as like Pennsylvania, which it's strange that like the reality show chef wouldn't be doing this in like, like if you think of Elwood City as like the capital city of its state, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. Probably have equal evidence for either. But if it's not there, then like, yeah, where is it? Unless you think of like if Elwood City is like the Allentown of its state, then they have to go to like the Philadelphia of the state or something like that. That's a really good point, and I didn't think about it. Yeah. Oh yeah, maybe it is in Crown City. I don't know, because there is a rec center in Elwood City where this could be taught. You would think, but he is also a very famous TV chef, so maybe they do have to drive to Crown City or something. That's Lucas, I'm so glad you brought that up because I didn't even really register that. This is quite a trek because on the way, the whole thing is that we get into all kinds of like scrapes and scrambles in these carpools, and Buster is the one who's really like hyped about it. He's really jazzed about it. Just like he's going on a carpool with his friends. They're going to have so much fun, and he's prepared like games and music and stuff like that. One of the other threads going into this is that Muffy wants to create her own cooking show, so she brings along a camera. We get some potential names for her cooking show: Crosswire's Classy Kitchen or Muffy Master Chef. I would probably go with the first one myself.
Yeah, the second one seems like a little close to another TV show.
So Buster is very into the idea of a carpool. It's actually quite cute. And he calls it Buster Baxter's Super Cool Cooking Class Carpool. And he introduces it as such. Now, the other thing is that, so Bitsy is the one who's driving everybody. Her car is a real beater. Like, everything that could be wrong with, like, a used car is here. There's the squeaky door that sticks when you open and when you close it. The seats are all ripped up. It's loud because there's probably a problem with the muffler. The CD player is broken. The AC is like super, super weak. I'm surprised it worked at all. So it's like, the worst car you've ever driven or like the worst car you've ever ridden in times 2.
She has a faulty GPS system.
Yes, it's like this weird off-market GPS that Muffy later points out is just like, isn't it the one that they recalled? And it leads them into near disaster. So Muffy obviously hates this. The whole trip is weird. Like, Arthur brings a bag of fruit that he can hopefully make into this pastry for his dad, which is funny later when they actually get to the cooking class. And Muffy, they put down the window to help out the AC, and her bonnet flies away. So she is not impressed at all. They have their lesson at the cooking class once they get there about making bread. Muffy doesn't actually like the thought of touching food or getting dirty, which, as the chef says, and it's true, if you want to make good food, you have to get a little messy sometimes. So he gives the direction to Muffy of just like, you have to knead the dough. Buster is surprisingly successful. I was wondering if this would be a plot point. It isn't, but Buster gets complimented because he doesn't do anything with his dough, and it rises. It looks like a giant egg on the table, and
we get a great reaction shot of Muffy and Arthur looking confused, and Buster getting complimented for not doing anything to his dough.
The other thing I liked is that Arthur brought in all these fruits and was going to ask for Chef Poufot to help make a pastry, but all the fruit he brought is not the type that you would make a pastry of. It's just like grapes, bananas, oranges, and he's like, no, I need berries, fresh berries. And it was just funny of just like, yeah, that's right, you wouldn't make a sweet pastry out of any of those. It's like he didn't bring in one single usable fruit. It's just a really little kid thing to do. They carpool for a second time. It's also disastrous. As you mentioned, Bitsy's GPS is defective and it leads them off the road. And this time, Buster decides that he's going to bring a bowl of hard-boiled eggs. Mostly hard-boiled eggs.
This bit is hilarious. So yeah, they're mostly hard-boiled eggs. The ones that are hard-boiled are marked with an H, except one of them might be an I, which Buster goes, I wonder what that means. And with this, have you seen those TikTok or maybe Instagram Reel videos, Will, where someone has ordered 12 waters from McDonald's and they're holding them in the backseat going,
yeah,
please be careful. And then someone will go over a speed bump, and then people have added onto this trend by just adding more and more waters till you see videos where you can't even see the person because they're behind so many waters in the back seat. That's what this reminds me of Buster with this bowl of uncovered eggs. There's also another video in this genre that's, I think, a little bit older, that's not part of a trend or anything, but it's like a guy in a back seat with a pot of gumbo with no lid, and he's calling his mom being like, Mama, why'd you give us a gumbo with no lid? It's about to spill all over the car. And he's literally balancing it on a piece of cardboard, and the gumbo. I'll see if I can find it, Will, because if you haven't seen this video, it's I would say the magnum opus of the genre.
I think I have seen that. That sounds familiar. But yeah, I do like those videos a lot, especially because once you realize it's a trend, I think that makes it a little funnier of people having to buy this many drinks and then just forcing a friend of theirs to get completely doused. It's really funny. And yeah, no, I didn't think of that watching this, but it's very much like that because, of course, in the middle of the GPS putting them onto the shoulder of the highway, Buster's eggs go everywhere and splatter everybody. This this is worse than the first time, and Buster's hopes are dashed about having a fun carpool. So he decides he's going to bring his music, and he's going to just listen to music on the way. I wouldn't call this an Arthur meme alert necessarily, but there is one of the most popular and enduring Arthur memes is the one where he has his headphones on, but they aren't in his ears. They're where our ears would be. And, something to, the caption is I know his ass ain't listening or something like that. Buster did it first. So Buster is wearing his headphones around his temples. So they're obviously his ears are different because they're bunny ears. But the headphones aren't for his bunny ears. they're also not where our ears are supposed to be. They're kind of on like his temples. They're like resting in factory position on his head.
Very strange.
It does look really weird. So this time around, Buster's hopes are dashed a little bit, but Bitsy tries to make it fun for them, and they play car bingo. And this actually is something that the three kids enjoy doing. Have you ever played like car bingo or like a variation of that?
No, I've definitely played I Spy.
Sure.
I've played all sorts of card games, but I was actually left thinking, like, car bingo seems like a cool idea. Now, it's going to be an issue if you're not in one of these. If you're in Arizona or something, your car bingo is going to be a lot more different. Driving through the desert as opposed to rural farmland. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it seems fun.
So yeah, they do have fun. They do like a variation of 99 bottles of beer on the wall. I think it's like 99 loaves of bread, and they get to like 56. Unfortunately, of course, completing the lemon car bingo here, the tire busts and Bitsy has to change a tire. But however, while they're waiting for Bitsy to change the tire, Arthur's problem kind of solves itself. He goes over to a local farm stand and buys a tangerine tort, which sounds pretty good to me. That's what he's going to have for his dad's birthday. He kind of gives up on making something for his dad and decides that I'll just buy it from this farmer here, which normally their desserts are pretty good. So fine choice. And even Muffy is kind of having fun. She's very inspired by Bitsy being a woman of action and changing the tire herself. Now, whether she does it all that well is kind of a little joke stinger for the end of the episode, but the episode ends with like them actually having so much fun on the carpool, they decide to skip out on cooking class, which they're not really having that great a time with, and to keep the carpool going. Yeah, that's what they decide to do. And the little stinger I mentioned is that like some of the nuts and bolts from the tire kind of fly off. So did Bitsy do the best job? I don't know, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. As long as the tire's on there, as long as it's not gonna fall off, then more power to you. So it's time for us to put our thoughts about these episodes into even more words as we talk about the final episode of season 15. All right, so Lucas, Grandpa Dave's memory album, I feel like this is going to be, instead of like, I agree with you in that there was not as much to put down about what mechanically happens in the episode, but in terms of how you feel about it, I'd love to hear what you have to say, as always.
Yeah, I think a perfect execution on the concept they intended to do. They wanted to do an episode about Alzheimer's, dementia, getting older in general, your memory starting to go. They picked Grandpa Dave as the subject for it, as he seems to be the go-to subject for episodes about getting older. They kind of let Grandma Thora avoid some of these kind of harder subjects. But I think they execute upon it perfectly, where it's the right level of seriousness, taking its audience seriously, not talking down to its audience, but also making it kid-friendly. There's moments of levity throughout the episode, usually provided by Francine's Booby. I just thought it was a really perfect episode, and I do kind of wish it was the last episode of the season, because I think it's a really nice note to end the season on. Now, I am, like you, a little bit disappointed that this is the last of Grandpa Dave, because I think he was a good, albeit underutilized character, but I think that this is an excellent swan song for him. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I mean, this it's similar to our complaints about Oliver Frensky. I feel like we never got to use either of them to their fullest potential enough. We saw some of it, but I would have liked to see so much more. So I will say I was expecting to completely bawl and sob watching this episode. I didn't, which is not a mark against the episode. But I did roll a little tear at Arthur's final line, which I wanted to make sure to put in there. I think it's very appropriate that we're talking about this now, and I also am glad that this is so deep into Arthur's run in terms of where we are. Season 15, it's like the beginning of the 2010s, and sometimes we talk about these older seasons that we don't have any childhood memories of, And it's like, man, is Arthur ever going to get back to like when we remember it, when it was great, you know? I think that's reductive. I think that Arthur has continued to be a quality show. But I also feel like there are still more and more time between like what I would call the all-time great Arthur episodes. I would consider this among them. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the way in which Arthur as a specific show dealt with a really serious topic. And it proves that you don't have to completely appeal to one audience. It's like, it's okay to go general, and it's okay to have a light touch in terms of like, this is kind of an unrelated rant, and I'll keep this short, and it's also a little half-baked because I don't watch this show, but I feel like there are some shows more recently that are meant for kids that tend to have these moments that are like, no child gets this the way you're talking about this. Like, I've seen a lot of clips of like a show like Bluey, and I don't...
Okay. Whoa, the Bluey slander. Listen, I haven't seen any Bluey. This might be a ECL Origins episode for another day.
Sure.
I haven't seen any Bluey. My sister loves Bluey.
Yes, and
she's a huge Bluey fan.
And I have friends who like Bluey. And I, as I say, have not watched a lot of Bluey. And maybe I will someday. I think I watched some of it once, and I was like, you know what? I'm not a parent yet. Like, I don't feel like this is... I don't have a child who should be watching this, and this is just a little too kiddie for me. Like, it was... But I've also seen, like, you know, clips from episodes, and it's like, when Bluey decides it wants to talk about something that affects the adults who also watch it, I'm like, yeah, but this is a show for kids. Like, that's nice, I guess, that, like, we're talking about a character's infertility, but, like...
What?
I don't know, dude. I don't have the context for that episode. This is what I'm thinking is that I fear that a lot of modern media that is meant for children can get a bit lost in the sauce of talking up to adults who are also watching it, because there are people our age or even older who still watch cartoons that are the intended primary audience is children. And there's no problem with that. I just think that I worry. I should say I worry. This is not a trend that I see because I don't watch a whole lot of cartoons, but I worry that a newer cartoon feels the need to talk as much to its adult audience as to its younger audience. And it's just like, you don't need to. We have adult shows for adults that can tackle these problems in a way that, like, you know, if I can take it to something else, I've been seeing on Twitter a lot of people pushing back on like something like Kamen Rider, which I've talked about before on the show. It has a big adult fan base, even though it is a Japanese live action show that is meant for children. And there are people that are just like, I want Kamen Rider to have blood, and I want it to have gore, and I want it to be serious. I'm like, watch something else. Like, that's not what this is supposed to be.
Not to wade into this discourse, I know this has been a topic of discussion in the Discord, but that could be a monkey's paw sometimes. For instance, what if someone made an adult Scooby-Doo show that didn't have Scooby-Doo in it? It turns out that might become a show for nobody.
Exactly. So the point I'm trying to make with this is, and this is something we always say when we encounter something that Arthur does really well, and that is that it talks to its intended audience with a tone of respect, but also realizing where that audience is. You might look at this and be like, I wish they would talk more in depth about Grandpa Dave's. Like, I wish you could say, I'm making up a guy here. I'm not saying anybody has said this, but I could imagine somebody older watching this and being like, why wouldn't they say Alzheimer's? Why wouldn't they say dementia? Why wouldn't they deal more with this? And it's like, I think they did exactly as much as they should. They focused on the positives. This episode was completely about positivity. It was framed in that way, with Bobby saying there's a lot of good things to getting old, which is something that actually it's nice for me to think about too. Getting old, even though, you know, I don't mean to complain on here, but it's just like, you know, I have some physical ouchies. I have some mental health things going on. but it's also nice to know that like getting old is a gift in its own way. Like Booby even says in the cold open, why are you complaining? You're alive. And there is a degree of that where it's like, yeah, no, actually getting to grow old, especially in light of what we talked about at the beginning of this episode, is just that. It's a gift that not everybody gets. And I think that this focused on how, even though Grandpa Dave has a new reality he has to adapt to, it's going to be okay. And there's still going to be a lot of joy in his life, even as he continues down this path. And that was all communicated, not indirectly. There was no need to say that indirectly. It was understood. And I feel that almost anybody can understand that. And the show helped its young audience enough to get to where it can understand that, even if it's not directly understood. Like, it's something that can sit with them. Or if they have a similar situation in their life, they can say, well, this is how Arthur felt, and this is how he handled it. Maybe I can too. Or this is how DW handled it. Maybe that's a good idea. Maybe I can make a memory book. And there's not a lot of shows that can do that well enough as Arthur can, and as Arthur did. So, it's not, I was going to say it's not one of the funniest. Actually, a lot of my notes were the Joan Rivers lines. I think that was a really, really great idea to have her be part of this episode. And I think you kind of mentioned this, Lucas. It's not very sad. There's no time. There's not a lot of time spent on Arthur and his feelings about it. Joan Rivers is here. She keeps the vibe up. It's positive. And in the end, we come out to a place where we're okay with it. We're okay with what is, as Kat mentioned in her email, a really, really bad situation no matter how you slice it. It's one of the worst things that can happen to a human being, but you leave this episode being like, okay, maybe it's not all going to be awful from here on. And that's great. Like, it's so good. It's tackling an issue as only Arthur can. And the fact that it was the last traditionally animated episode of the season is like, Arthur is still proving why it still has it this deep into its life cycle. And then
and then there's Buster's Carpool Catastrophe, which I keep almost accidentally calling Buster's Carpool Karaoke, which would be an insult to this Arthur episode.
Yeah. And then we kind of have to end it with this. I thought it was okay. Like it's kind of a strange conceit. It's just like Buster's really jazzed about a carpool. Okay, well, we have to fill 12 minutes to finish out the season, so sure. There's elements in here I kind of thought were funny. I liked Chef Poufo. I thought that was a fun throwaway character. I liked Bitsy's awful car, and like it's like the most stereotypically terrible car. That was funny. All of the situations, like Buster, he has to have a bowl of eggs with him this time. It all kind of set itself up. And then we got to the end where it's like, actually, we're having more fun with this. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like Muffy would hate this through and through, even if things kind of went her way. So, like, I was kind of done watching Arthur after Grandpa Dave's memory album. But then it's like, okay, let's keep going. All right. That is an Arthur episode for you. So, like, I thought it was fine. I don't really have any strong feelings on it.
So I accidentally watched these in the wrong order. I watched this one first.
That's actually probably way better.
And it does help this episode in spades. It's
I
a very
bet it
fun
does.
episode. All the jokes work. All the crappy car jokes work. All the French chef jokes work. All the just Muffy just turning her nose up at everyone works. It's one of those Arthur episodes where there's no moral. It's just kind of like a sitcom, basically. Like, you could see this being a Seinfeld episode. Everybody getting upset in their carpool and learning to overcome it. So yeah, just a fun, light episode, which is done a disservice, I think, by being paired with Grandpa Dave's memory album.
Yeah, so if you haven't watched the Arthur episode yet, like, definitely go in reverse order. Go Carpool Catastrophe and then Grandpa Dave's memory album. I think that's way better, and maybe we should have done that. But this is how it originally aired in that order: Grandpa Dave and then the Carpool. So I got to experience it as it was. Lucas, perhaps you experienced it how it should have been. And there we have it. I know this is, I don't mean to like be like, this is the end of the show. It's not the end of the podcast, but it does feel like an end of the era. Like, we have been kind of anticipating this for a long time, and it's taken us 6.5 years
to run into what's going to be the Flash era of Arthur, saying goodbye to traditional animation. Now, it's not as traditional as it gets because, in the past few seasons they've been using like digital coloring, and it's been aided by computers.
I could have sworn I saw some motion tweens when Bitsy pulled the car over.
Could very well be. I think what's probably most likely is they had been using digital techniques for the last couple of seasons, and then they're just fully going into into Flash as just a. I'm gonna have to do some looking into it. Gonna have to do some research. I imagine cost probably plays a part of it, but it's also, I think it's. I took one last watch of the theme song. I don't watch the opening usually when we watch these episodes, but that is like...
Well, there's two types of people, Will. I watch it every week.
That's good. That's good, and you should, and it's great. I just I just want to get to the... I'm eager to get to the episode, so I usually skip ahead. I didn't do that this time, and I made sure to watch it very closely because that is the first piece... That's the first piece of traditional animation that you see in any Arthur episode, and for 15 seasons, that's what we saw. Because starting in season 16, they redo that. They redo it in many key ways that I'm sure we will talk about right away. So yeah, I'm sad to see it go. It means that we're really entering a time of Arthur that neither of us, neither you nor I, are really familiar with in any way. This is very new to us. And if you've listened to any of our commentaries, we've had our own thoughts on the Flash animation look of Arthur, which we will talk about in the next episode. But yeah, it feels like I'm sad to see the traditional ways go because Arthur has looked very, very good. You go back to those old seasons that, the original pilot season was like really expensive, but you can tell because the animation is so good. And it's not just because it was made in more traditional ways. It just sometimes this show just looks really, really good.
I would describe the original 3 seasons as painterly.
Yes.
Listen, folks, it's a new era. We're diving headfirst into uncharted waters. You can always go back and watch the old episodes of Arthur. They'll always be there. And hey, if you miss traditional animation, go dig out your Akira Blu-ray and be like, wow. Sometimes if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we really did ruin the animation industry, didn't we? And once you come to terms with that and you know it's only downhill from here, you can accept this new season for what it is. And I'm excited to go on this journey.
I think I'll make that the title of the episode. We really did ruin the animation industry, didn't we? Yeah. So we do have a bit of a journey over the next couple of weeks. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Elwood City Limits. So if you are on the Patreon, next week you are going to be hearing 2 things. You are going to be getting the ECL Origins episode about Yvonne of the Yukon. Speaking of other things I have to do research on, that's going to be fun. The Canadian cartoon about what's that period of a basically hundreds-year-old Frenchman who gets frozen in the Canadian North and found by the indigenous people there.
Yes.
It's gonna get weird. It's gonna get gross. I'm really looking forward to revisiting this.
Yes. Apparently, it's culturally insensitive to every culture except the indigenous people of the Canadian North, who are treated with the most dignity out of everybody. But French people, brace yourselves. You're on notice.
So that's happening only on our Patreon. You're also going to get early access to our Season 15 recap, where Lucas and I are going to be doing our top 5 episodes of the season, and we're going to be encapsulating our feelings about, leaving Season 15 and going into the next season. So patrons, that's going to be coming out for you next week. If you're on the free feed, you're going to get that Season 15 recap a week later, plus a preview of our ECL Origins episode about Yvonne of the Yukon. That's going to be in one big audio file for you, and I hope you enjoy that. Remember, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits if you would like that earlier and in full. Then, once we're through with that, coming up in February on both the Patreon and on the free feed, Season 16 is here. The Flash years are here. The first episode of Season 16 is called Based on a True Story. It's a double episode, and we're going to finally learn about LaDonna and Bud.
These are characters that we've seen in the commentaries, we have a loose grasp on, and unfortunately, it seems LaDonna comes with a bit of baggage from the fan base. So we're going to start making our own opinions as we move forward into a brand new era of the show that we have been talking about for nearly 7 years. And Lucas, I just hope we have as much fun with the show as we've always had. And I think we'll both be keeping an open mind. And I'm interested to see how our thoughts evolve as we move into a new style and a new era of Arthur. And that's it for Elwood City Limits this week. My name is Will Young, and for Lucas Mancini,
I'm sad, I'm broke, why isn't there anything good on TV? Please, stop complaining.
We'll see you next time.